Hello, I'm excited to be here with you. My name is Jessica Castaneda. I work with Spark Innovations, and you're here because hopefully you wanted to listen to the presentation. It's hands-on minds and instruction. And so how to basically engage your students effectively through STEM. And so really excited to be here just to tell you a little bit about my background. I worked with migrant students for about 17 years with the Tennessee Migrant Education Program. Have lots of years in after school, also was a project coordinator for a 21st century program and for a LEAPS program. And my background comes in really trying to find ways to engage students and to help them in their really with where their needs are, while ensuring that it's something that's fun, something that they enjoy learning, something that also makes sense to them and they can see the real world connection. And so I'm going to be kind of walking you through some resources that we have. Spark Innovations has over 120 free curriculums that are available for everybody. So I'm going to go ahead and see if I can share my screen back and forth to several different things today. And so our website is sparkedinnovations.net. And when you get there, we have several things that are available there. Right there in the front is something called, we just have instructional resources. And if you click on this, basically when you scroll down, then you'll be able to see lots of different free units. And so some of the things that I'm going to mention today will come from some of these units right here. We have everything from advertising to things about the body parts to how to do community gardens. We have all sorts of very hands-on project-based learning that students can do. And all of them are really intentional in trying to provide more information than a teacher may need to use. They're all targeted to specific skills and standards that students need to know, but it's in a fun way. So if, one of the ones I'm going to talk about is surviving the ecosystem. So when you open this up, you'll be able to see right here at the part, it says part 1, we broke things down into different sections, kind of maybe in like an hour and 15-minute increment of when you would instruct students. And we have lots of resources linked. We have skills and standards that you're covering, just lots of different information that's available here. So I'm going to kind of in this presentation, walk through some of like the thought process of how these have been developed and why they're there, but also some ways that STEM can be incorporated into everyday learning. Sometimes teachers want to make things more engaging. They want it to be interesting for students, but they're not really sure where to start. And so a bunch of these resources they're available for free. We do provide professional development. One of the things that we offer is basically walkthrough of the lessons. All of them we have done ourselves. We've worked with students. We can talk about where we get our supplies. And so we do professional development all over the state and lots of different states. And so a few other things we have are we have a student portal that students can use. We do some different types of learning camps. And so you can learn more about what we do on our website. Lots and lots of free resources, but if you ever are interested in actually having some trainers come to your school district or to provide a program, these are the kind of things that we do. But I really want to focus more in the presentation, not so much talking about, the things that we can train you on, but instead really mentioning some of the curriculums and some of our thought processes on, including these in, and hopefully really giving you some ideas on how to engage your students effectively through STEM. So I'm going to try to watch my time and hopefully not lose you. So again, all of our curriculums you can find at our website, which is Sparked Innovations, www.sparkedinnovations.net. So feel free to go there and download whatever you want to use from there. So kind of our motto is, it says, we believe that academic excellence can coexist with delight. We think learning should be fun. It should be something that there's a lot of ways that you can really engage students. So when those students are, you want to be thinking of the things that you can do to really engage them, but it should be fun. It should be something that they enjoy. So like it says here, tying learning to the real world. For me, math was something as a kid that really, I can get multiplication, division, I can understand all of those things, but when it came to algebra, when it came to geometry, when it came to trigonometry, sometimes I just really had a hard time finding the real world connection. So it says here, just like when you go to a training, you wonder, what does this have to do with me? Kids wonder the same thing. So we want to make sure that we're bringing that real world into the classroom. Who actually does this kind of math? Who does this kind of science? Why would you need this particular skill? And then are there current issues that you could bring into life in your instruction with them. So it says here, I'm going to kind of thread a math theme through this, just because sometimes I think sometimes people say, well, how do I bring math and STEM, or how do I bring science? It almost seems like an obvious one, but we're gonna talk about the different subjects that you can bring into the curriculums that that we're going to be sharing with you. They're all based in ensuring that there's reading language arts, that there's science, that there's math. We usually have an art connection, history, and then there's just the engineering part that's included in there. Lots of project-based learning. But it says, as it says here, as you probably know, there's an epidemic in our country of kids growing up learning to fear math, which of course can adversely affect their futures in countless ways. It also begins at a very young age as they absorb negative stereotypes surrounding math, and just things that they feel like they're not very good at. Maybe it's not math, maybe it's science that they have a hard time. Maybe it's just, these thought process of trying to figure out different projects. But it says, and with every day, the more that passes, math becomes more and more critical to our kids' success. And so this is not just about math, but it's about STEM in general. But there are so many professions that all of the learning skills that they can get from STEM instruction can really help on lots of different areas. So we want to make sure that the things that we're doing, that whatever project it is, that they see it as friendly, they see it as relevant to their lives, and problem-based learning really helps students look into this, understand that, that context to their real life. So we want kids to basically learn a concept and then go and do a concept. So get their hands in it, turn on all different parts of their brains. We want them connecting to what they already know, what they, new things that they're learning through the instruction, and really kind of connecting all those pieces together. So a lot of the resources that we have online, we have gotten ideas from other places. And so we really want to, put a nod out to some of these really excellent places that already do, that have lots of resources that teachers can access really at any time. And so here's a list of some of those. So on our website, all of our curriculums that we have, if we pulled resources from other places, we always try to link and show where we got those ideas, but we have like a narrative that runs through it. Whenever you're doing a curriculum, it'll kind of take you from one part to the next and kind of tie everything together. And so that is through our work of, really trying to put those pieces together. So one of the things that we try to think about with Spark Innovations is that sometimes as instructors, as teachers, we want to do something fun, but we may not always tie it back to something that students need to learn. And I always like to give the example of making butter. That could be something that really may not, it might be kind of fascinating to kids. You might expose them to some new ideas, but you could literally pull skills that they needed to learn. So, and then sometimes, in the classroom or in the learning opportunities that you're able to provide to kids, you don't always have the same grade levels in the classroom. So maybe you are working with a family, or maybe you're doing some, in-home tutoring, or you're doing after school programming, or maybe you're doing like a Saturday activity, and you've got maybe a kindergartner, third grader, and a seventh grader. And that's a wide spread. And so you have all three of them sitting in front of you, and you think, how am I going to make this activity really relevant? This is going to be fun, but how do I make sure that they each learn a skill that they need to? So throughout all of our curriculum design, we always think, let's give people an activity that they could pull multiple skills out for different grade levels. And the instruction, the conversations, the activities they do can be tweaked a little bit based on the grades and the skill set of the child. So for example, making butter. I can have my kindergartner in front of me with my third grader and my seventh grader, and we can shake up the butter. We can shake up the cream and see, talk about what's going to happen. And we can count by twos. Maybe we count how many times we have to shake before we start to see something different happen. And we count by twos. And so as I'm counting by twos, my third grader can also listen to that. And maybe they have a hard time with counting by twos, or maybe we're going to have them skip count a different number. And so my seventh grader can do the same thing. But when I'm looking at my third grader, my third grade skill could be sequence of events. I want them to write the recipe from beginning to the end, every step that we did. Kindergartners could still draw that. Seventh grader could still write that too. But I will have picked out a skill. My skill will be for kindergartners, counting by twos. For my third graders, it's going to be understanding sequence of events. And maybe my seventh grader needs to know how a liquid could turn into a solid. So at Spark Innovations, we would make sure that the curriculum included everything that you needed to know about how a Jersey cow could be, eating grass, and what happens with the stomachs, and what happens with the body, and why is there cream, and all of that process. So I can teach that to my seventh grader while we're still making this butter. Third grader could listen in, kindergartner could listen in, but I have deliberately picked skills that my 7th grader can use. And so all of our curriculums try to have activities that are rich enough that you could kind of pick out, say, I want to teach this skill through this activity. And the curriculums are also more than you could ever teach. So if you're only teaching 7th grade and you're going to focus on the liquid and solid, you may never need to do the part about sequence of events. But if you did, the curriculum will include it. So we want to make sure it's, like it says here, they will not pick up what they need just from doing a fun activity. We want to make sure our fun activities have a purpose and a focus, and it's related to something that the students need. So engagement to us means stronger instruction. It's what we all want to learn, but it's also making connections to what we already know and making sure that things really stick in our heads. So something to think about. It says in 20 minutes, you remember 60% of what you just learned. In 24 hours, you remember 30%. But if you practice that within 24 hours and then practice it again later, you remember 80%. So it's kind of taking that concept into your instruction. Did I just introduce something and then test students on it? Did I introduce something, they do something about it, then we talk about it and then learn a little bit more? Am I able to really make those connections deep into those children's minds? So some ways that you can kind of help with what they've learned is, you play a game for a review. You teach and then you review. You solve a mystery or a real life problem related to what you're teaching. You work on long-term projects that have different elements that build on each other. That's one of our favorite ways to teach. We build, we introduce something and then we add something else to it and add something else to it. And so that's really one of the reasons why our units or our curriculums are designed how they are. So it says here, thinking analytically is a skill like carpentry or driving a car. It can be taught, it can be learned, and it can be improved with practice. But like many other skills, such as riding a bike, it is not learned by sitting in a classroom and being told how to do it. Analysts, learn by doing. So we want to make sure that we're giving a chance to our students to learn by doing. And sometimes in the classroom, that's not what they get to do. Most likely, if you got good at something, you were able to get instructive feedback that help you really know how to change what you're doing, that's good or bad. And so you want to make sure, you think about a coach or a musician or athlete, they observe their players comparing what the player did, to this effective execution of a move. Maybe it's a football team and they're looking at, how they're doing their plays. Then the coach steps in and suggests and often demonstrates specific changes that the player can make. And the player takes this information, takes those adjustments, reevaluates, and continues. They don't just sit there and listen. They are listening and then doing. And so that's one of those things that we like to do is, they listen, they learn, and then they do. So this first one that we're going to talk about, one of our units, is called Surviving the Ecosystems. And so ecosystems is something that, throughout school, kids are learning about different ecosystems and different things in the ecosystems. And so we really focused on the idea that they could be explorers in these 4 different areas and they could see what they needed to do to really survive. And so, most of us have seen the show Survivor. It's still running strong after all these years. But the idea is kind of add some game twists, add some things that they have to try to figure out, add some challenges into this. And so they have to figure out how to survive the ecosystems. So in the beginning, in the curriculum, it kind of suggests divide them into tribes. They're going to have non-competitive activities, but they'll be intellectual, cooperative, and athletic skills that they're going to use in these different units. And they'll basically be able to have to try to figure out if they can survive through these different challenges that they're going to do. These are not competitions between tribes, but challenges that each tribe must go through. And so one of the first areas in this curriculum is looking at the rainforest. So you may set the stage with a little bit of music. Students research specific coordinates or areas in the map of a rainforest. They visit research places like Brazil or Madagascar that are within the rainforest. And so they're looking for, specific places that they could possibly visit on the map. So on our trip in the rainforest, we wake up. And so anything I'm referencing here, referencing right now, there's an actual activity related to this. So on our trip to the rainforest, we wake up in the morning after our boat crashed and we discover that we are lost in the rainforest, unsure about whether or not there'll be a rescue. And then we have to learn about all the different dangers that lie between the green trees that make up the rainforest that are too numerous to count. The environment is infamous for testing the human limits. By sticking together to the guidelines and working together, the kids are going to learn how they can get through this environment. So we know that rainforests are critical to survival and life on Earth. Students and teachers will explore what the rainforests are like and how they really impact across, what happens in the rainforest can affect us here in the United States. They also are going to do some activities where they actually look at many ecosystems. So it says here, it's real hard to observe changes in our environment because they're so big. Scientists can use what they observe in models like our terrariums to understand what might happen to our planet and to understand the water cycle. So there's several different things that they do through these activities. And so they may measure the weights of different elements, record them, compare weights between days and their different little systems that they're creating to look at water loss. They do a competition to look at what kind of things exist in a real world ecosystem and how they're kind of lined up. And so they're looking at the different types of animals that might be there and how they live and how they survive. They're looking at different resources that exist particularly in the rainforest. And so there's a game that they do looking at these different colors of of these resources and what they mean. They look at who will actually survive if certain resources were to exist, which animals would thrive and which ones would make it. And then they play this actual game related to that. They also look at a tree that's specific to the rainforest, and they look at how this tree is able to really support itself and how the design of the kapuk tree. And so it says here, a woody giant must support a huge trunk and heavy branches without toppling over. And so they look at the challenges that this particular tree has, and they read a book related to that. And then they try to figure out how to build an actual model of the tree that can support this really heavy branches and making sure that they design the kind of roots that would be able to hold it up. Then they look at research that's done currently in different places in the rainforest. They look as if they were researchers, how they could get to a specific place. They look at the transportation and costs and real world costs right now, as they have to try to figure out how to design their expedition. They have to figure out if they were to carry in their supplies, how they could build a canopy, a walkway that would really test how much weight they could actually support. So students are given a budget, and then this budget, they have certain value for each item. They're able to buy certain things for their construction and be able to actually make this little canopy walkway that they're making. Then they get a little bit deeper into the jungle and they look at how water moves throughout the rainforest, the effects on deforestation on humans, animals, and medicine. And then we bring out a little soda bottle and look at different ways that we can create these different layers in the rainforest and the 4 general layers that exist in vegetation: the canopy, the sun seekers, the understory, and the forest floor. And they learn what actually happens in the forest floor and how things are decomposed as they make a decomposition column. And so it's like a little tiny compost pile that they can actually put inside of these, inside of the soda bottles, and really see what happens with moisture and air and temperature and light and what happens in this, in this process. They also make a terra aqua column, which looks at kind of what's happening between the land and the water. It has 3 different components, which are soil, water, and plants. And they look at how those work together. We also know that a lot of times in the rainforest, there's water, but is it safe to drink? So they simulate a water hunt, trying to figure out where water is available. And then they design their own water filters and explore what actually makes water safe. If you were to have, water in your own community, to know, maybe you're out, if you were on a survival kind of mission, and, knowing if you could drink the water or not, how you could make some different filters. And so if, tying math to some of these things, you could actually measure the volume of water before and after, before filtering, to see if there's any loss. They actually do some science activities of kind of a tribal survival challenge to make water, walk down a rope. And so they look at the properties of water and kind of what's happening with that. They look at the taste of the rainforest and different fruits and vegetables, mainly fruits that are grown, and kind of the spices and things that, there's vegetables also that come, where they come from, these things that originally came from the rainforest. And there's also many things that are currently in their grocery stores that we wouldn't have, if we didn't have the rainforest. Also looking at many of our medicines and how, 25% of active ingredients in today's cancer-fighting drugs come from rainforest organisms. And since then, less than 1% of rainforest plants have been tested by scientists so far, just understanding what kind of cures could be out there and the importance of really protecting, those parts of the earth. And then looking at what happens if there is too much deforestation, and how that will impact the whole world. And then also, how that impacts the food you eat, how that impacts the medicine, all of those kind of things. And then they'll take a taste test through different parts and look at, trail mix and where a lot of those things come from. we have some, in all of our curriculums, we try to have reading, math, language, science, social studies, those kind of things, and they play a game. So we bring some math in where they do a around the world kind of game. And then we take a look at some of the consequences of deforestation and looking at how it disturbs the natural soil to plant cycle, and how soils can be extremely vulnerable to erosion and the loss of this vital topsoil. And as you can see, we're building things. We're talking about one subject, we're going super deep in a lot of different areas. And that really helps kids build those connections and understand how those things work together. And so they may make some delicious dirt through a project as they're looking at what's happening to the soils, just to kind of do something fun related to that. Then we move on to deserts. We've gone through the rainforest. Now we're going to take a look at, where deserts are and see, what's the difference between them. We started out a lot of times with all of our projects really looking at what kids already know about, certain places. And so depending on the part of the world that you're from, if you're out west, a lot of kids are very familiar with the desert. And so kind of do a graffiti wall of basically everybody's ideas of what they understand. And then we take a look at why deserts are how they are. Why are they so hot? Why do they get so cold? Why do they have so much sand? What's actually happening? What plants thrive? What plants don't? And then we take a look at the Atacama Desert, which is on the coast of the Pacific Ocean. And the cold sea currents cool this hot desert air and produce huge blankets of fog in the atmosphere. And the onshore wind really brings the fog inland. And the cactus plants thrive by capturing the water that's in the fog. And so we look at some of the plants, we look at some of the animals, we look at the way that nature really captures the water in these different areas. And then sometimes we do just fun kind of breakdowns where they may do an art project. And so this one, they're actually doing an art project where they make cupcakes, and they actually using the icing, they learn how to make it look like some of the different types of cactuses. They really look at camouflage and look at different ways that animals use camouflage and why it's so important. They do some art projects related to that. Then if you wanted to bring math in, you're specifically looking at symmetry and portions and ratios and some things that you can do with that. We look at the real world connection of, heat, stroke, and what kind of clothes, like if you were actually to go on an expedition to the desert, what kind of clothes you would wear, how those clothes could actually help you keep, safe, dry, and alive in the desert, and the things that you would need to have. We look at some parts of the world that are so incredibly dry, but then when they have, this desert that I mentioned before, it's one of the driest deserts on Earth, but after the rain, it just explodes, with all of this different life. And so looking at how some things can stay dormant for a long time, and then when that rain comes, how it can transform. They look at the survival of how animals and plants survive in the desert to really, it says, things will expire when the going gets tough. Plants will leave behind seeds and eggs and things that can stay dormant. They evade. They either, animals or plants will go north, not really plants, but, the animals will go north or south and then endure. They'll look at which animals have these adaptations and camouflages and things that'll really help them get through. And so they really look at all different types of animals that have adapted and what adaptation was necessary to really, pass through this extreme environment and what works. And then we look a little bit deeper, and they, discuss the idea of a mirage, and, then they head out to the Australian outback and they look specifically at a missing lake and what happens, why this place is a lake sometimes, why it's a desert, and they look at what happens with that. There's a really cool video called Fata Morgana, and it's just a kind of a fun way to learn about a mirage. And so kind of a fun video to watch. So in all of our curriculums, we have these extensions of videos or resources that you can use. We look at how much water we actually need to survive. This is the subject of people and water in the desert has generated considerable interest and confusion since the early days of World War II, when the US Army was preparing to fight North Africa. At one time, the US Army thought it could condition men to do with less water by progressively reducing their water supplies during training. They called it water discipline, and then it caused hundreds of heat casualties because they really didn't know what they were doing. And so it kind of talked with students about understanding the difference between physical activity, air temperature, water consumption, and how the body requires a certain amount of water for certain activities and, certain temperatures. And so they perform experiments to really understand the science of evaporation and also how it really applies to human survival. They look at what foods are most optimal. If they were in the desert, how they could, really make it. And then they actually look at some foods that in our day, that people are saying, oh, hey, this is great for power and energy. And they look at what they're made of. And and try to figure out which is their favorites. They look at the legend behind the Indian rain stick and kind of the story behind that. And then they actually make their own rain sticks and kind of look and explore the ideas that have, why that exists. They look at what happens with the mountains and force of wind and how it can actually move mountains through erosion. And they look at the study of geology and weather and wind activity. And it says, although water is much more powerful, when they really look at what happens with the wind, they can see, really how the sands are formed and a lot of different things from mountains. Then they look at surviving dust storms and what happens. And they actually watch some videos of how, what meerkats do and different animals do to basically survive these dust storms. And then they'll create some, kind of some art projects related to that. They'll create 2 different scenes, a desert, they'll look at cool colors and warm colors and kind of have that actually translate to some of the things that they're learning about the deserts. Then they actually design a little desert dune buggy. It's a, test that they create this little powered vehicle through some different processes that they do. Then we look at specifically distance, velocity, time, lengths, and widths, and things that they do with their little dune buggy that they make. And we switch on to swamps and look at this whole new ecosystem in swamps. And so you can see we're going way deep. I mean, you're bringing lots of different things in for them to hopefully understand really well why the ecosystem is how it is, the importance of it, where to find them, things like that. And so lots of different things they do specifically with the swamp. So learn about what swamps are made of, how they become swamps. There are 2 different main types of swamps. There's freshwater swamps and saltwater swamps. And there can be grass, there can be trees, but there's always water. And they learn, there's some really interesting videos that we have related to, like Planet Earth has some really good videos about swamps. So swamps are transition areas. They're neither totally land nor totally water. They exist in all different kinds of climates in every continent except for Antarctica. They vary in size. They can be a small pothole all the way to a huge coastal salt marsh. Some swamps are flooded woodlands, some are former lakes or ponds, and so they really look at the difference. Students learn about wetlands. They create their own simple scientific model. The first part of the procedure demonstrates how wetlands really prevent flooding and erosion. The second part of what they're creating demonstrates how wetlands improve water quality by filtering sediments and pollutants. Then they actually kind of make their own swampland. Students love slime, and so we use chocolate slime and bubbling slime to actually make these little replicas of swamps, and they kind of have a tribe challenge to see who can make the best replica of that. Then we talk about kind of stories of monsters that people have said have existed in the swamps for years, and they kind of look at some of the stories of that. There's some kind of fun videos that they watch related to that. And then they actually create and draw and make a new swamp creature. And there's some really cool ones that are kind of made already, and they kind of have to answer a question about their swamp creature. Where does it live? What is it called? How does it, have, what is it? How does it have babies? Does it have eggs? Does it have, live offspring? How was it discovered and who discovered it? And so we kind of do your reading language arts project with that. Then they take a look at, telling stories and, how to actually write the story about their little monster that they've created. And so we kind of go through some different books that are really good. In our journey through the swamp, we want to learn from the best, from those who have gone before us, and they look at just different types of stories that exist. They look at what's happening in the non-Newtonian nature of quicksand, and they actually make there's a project that they make their own quicksand pits. And so it's, specifically in their curriculum, exactly how to do that. Then they actually look at oobleck and kind of swamp mud and what's happening within, and they actually make a fluorescent magic mud, and they use it with a black light. Then they take a look at connecting everything together, how we have this giant recycling system called a biogeochemical cycle, which is an amazing process. And they look at they make a small model of this, and they build, this column that's, a simple device for culturing a large variety of microorganisms, and it's a visual experience for demonstrating life cycles and the needs of soil bacteria. And so we kind of walk them through that process, and they can kind of learn about that. We also look at I know I'm going to say this wrong, the Atchafalaya Basin. It's actually, I've been to it. It's down in Louisiana. It's one of America's last great river swamp. It stretches 1.2 million acres from it's in all the way to Louisiana, all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. They look at the different type of wildlife that are in there, including 24 different snakes that are found. Only a lot of those are found right there, and 7 of them are poisonous. You would think there'd be a lot more. And they look at specifically, terminology, how to, look at grade. We do some specific grade age appropriate math activities related to this. Then we move on to mountains. We've been in all these other areas. We look at, mountains, and we started out with kind of some stories of the mountains and some videos that they can watch. Then they look at kind of making their own stories, and they look at how to sketch out different stories, and so kind of based on some of the videos that they watch. We look at, says here, the mountain environment is one of the harshest places for humans to try to survive. Mountains are defined as land masses with the summit above 2,000 feet, and they can be very dangerous places. And so we can think of the idea if they were stranded there. They participate in a reality show called Survival of the Fittest, that you sign them up, and they try to stay alive while showing they're specifically doing different projects related to that. They get problems where they have to try to figure out the problems and figure out what they need to do to be able to make it through. Once the team start collecting supplies, the fun begins. Randomly, they pick one of the survival scenario cards. They read it aloud. A card might read that the game creators are playing with the temperatures at night, and the team would need to have a sleeping bag in order to stay healthy. Each team needed to hand a sleeping bag or lose a health level. So they have different things that they have to try to figure out what kind of things would help them survive better through that. They watch a clip from the big summer blowout from Frozen, and discuss what Anna needed, what equipment she needed to be able to go safely into the mountains. And then when the weather changed, and what they have, whether it's appropriate or not. They actually look in, there's an activity that they do looking at ice, looking at the laws of supply and demand, and kind of how that all works. Ice blocks from the mountains are traveling all through, and they're valued all over the world. Buyers and sellers meet weekly at the ice exchange. Students act as buyers and traders and experience firsthand the joys and frustrations of supply and demand, and they do a project related to that. And then once they get all the way through, there's several other activities in there, but they play a game called the Wander Games, and they have to do specifically to try to see, for everything that they've learned from these different ecosystems, how they can really survive. It's based on the knowledge that they've learned from each one of those different areas. So as you can see, there's a lot that, that's just one curriculum that's really surviving the ecosystem. So every single one of our curriculums is built similar in that you go deep, you do things that are engaging, that are fun, and then you continue to reinforce and teach concepts that the students need to know. And so we have another one called All About the Body. And this is the idea of armies of microscopic robots patrolling our bodies. Cleaning and maintaining them has been a theme in futuristic science fiction for decades. But actually, they start to look at nanobots and how some of these things are actually a lot closer than we think. So they learn how doctors and scientists are using a variety of techniques to create nanobots that will eradicate cancers, and others to deliver medicine right where it's needed. And then students are invited to join an elite team of biomedical engineers, and they are going to actually have to do some projects to try to figure out how to bring medicine to the right places in people's bodies. And one of the things that they'll do is they'll use Legos and magnetiles, and they're going to use a hex bug nano to basically make a maze and try to get this hex bug to go exactly where it needs to without stopping. And then they can use the Ozobots and actually create this some codes to, on a life size, let's say it was just a drawing of a human, to try to get this nanobot to bring this here to the right spot. And so they learn about some of the coding challenges to be able to do that. And so then another unit, I'm just going to kind of preview a few of them, and that are way deeper. I'm just going to give a few examples. We have a curriculum called No Place Like Home. And so they take a look at what is so cool about the earth, and what elements really have to be in place for everything to work right. And they're going to look specifically at the earth. And so we really open it up by introducing them to, some different picture books, some different books that kind of explore, where we live and what we do. We ask students why people explore, cluster students, they kind of look at different reasons why different explorers have explored, and the motivations for why people explored when they did before, or why they're doing it now. And so it's really understanding, what's happening on this earth. And says students and scientists explore the unlikely and unexpectedly interconnected systems that allow life on our planet, our strange planet, to breathe. And so there's several different really cool videos that kind of let them see what it looks like, to be looking down on Earth. But there's one that I want to show just real quick to kind of show you the kinds of videos that we have. So I'm going to have to make sure that I share my screen right so you can actually see this. So I'm going to share this.
NASA scientists have performed the first multi-year study using satellite data to measure the 3D distribution of dust that travels from the Sahara Desert to the Amazon rainforest. The Sahara is the world's largest desert. At more than 3 million square miles, it's almost the size of the continental United States. Each year, Saharan dust is lifted from the ground and transported by winds on a 3,000-mile journey across the Atlantic Ocean. A portion of the dust collects in the Amazon basin, the largest rainforest on the planet. Although dust particles are small, no larger than around a tenth of the width of a human hair, they form massive plumes that can be seen from space. NASA's Calypso satellite was launched in 2006 to study the vertical structure of clouds and particles in Earth's atmosphere. Calypso observations from 2007 through 2013 show that on average 182 million tons of dust leaves Africa each year. Of this amount, about 27 million tons is deposited in the Amazon basin.
Sahara dust contains phosphorus, which is an important nutrient for plants. In the tropic region, the phosphorus is quite limited, so it's important to estimate how much dust from desert is transported to the Amazon.
The study shows Saharan dust adds phosphorus to the soils that help compensate for losses due to surface runoff and floods. However, the amount of dust transported to the Amazon changes from year to year. According to the study, this variation is closely associated with changes in rainfall in the Sahel, a belt of semi-arid land just south of the Sahara.
When the Sahel was dry, the dust transport to the Amazon in the next year would increase. When it was wet, dust transport will decrease. Using satellites to get a clear picture of dust is important for understanding and eventually using computers to model where that dust will go now and in future climate scenarios.
Let's see. I'll close this. We found that to be super cool. So let me open this up to here. Let's see. So kind of connecting students to see, look at all the, how these things all work together. And so this particular unit is not our ecosystem unit, but it's really looking at the Earth itself and all of these elements, how you may not think that we're connected, but all of these things really are necessary. Students also learn about transpiration, how that happens to how plants' lungs really work. I know it's not lungs, but they understand the process of water evaporation through specialized openings or pores in the leaves called stomates. And so they do some activities that really look at what happens with that. They look at cohesion and water and how that, water's properties are really necessary to kind of get them, get the water through the plants. There's some really cool videos that look at, capillary action. They're looked at wood themselves, like how wood is made, and just kind of some cool designs and things that they do actually with toothpicks. And then they look at, really trying to model a cross section of a tree trunk and visualize the inner layers of the earth tree and how they work. And so they do some projects with straws. And then they look at transpiration and transportation. And so they do some projects that really look at understanding what is happening, with trees as they breathe. And pretty cool to see how this all works together. So it says kids scientists of all ages are dazzled by the magic of watching colored water move along a paper towel. And so they kind of, compares that to understand how that works. And it's, then there's some math connections that we always try to bring. Again, this is, full STEM with lots of different activities, but kind of, specifically bringing out just different areas. Looking at celery and how it transpires in the celery. So they look at what we talked about with cohesion and adhesion of water. And they do an actual experiment with the celery to see what happens with these two things together. They explore the water cycle. We kind of talked about that a little bit in some of the other ones. Students explore what clouds are, what they're made from, why they create the shapes that they currently do, what causes all the water to fall. They look at how that affects climates and, for example, how they can be barriers for heat moving in and out of our atmosphere and their purpose. A lot of you guys have seen a cloud in the bottle, so we throw that in there too. And they also learn firsthand about air pressure, temperature changes, condensation, nuclei, and cloud formation. They also look at the idea of seeding clouds and how that's being used in this country right now to really see if more rain can be brought in places that have had mega droughts. They then practice a little sky farming on their own with the cloud and the jar experiment, and they explore different types of precipitation. And then we have this whole other section that's really looking at something called diatoms and how important they are. And a lot of times, it's one of those really important things that most of us have probably never known about. And diatoms are around this planet. They get their nutrients in different ways. They take a look at, different ways that that they have effect on the planet and what happens when they die and where they're used. It says, unlike snowflakes, these diatoms never melt. When they die, their dead bodies pile up by the trillions on the floor of oceans and lakes, forming a chalky mud. This plentiful mud is used as a water filter. It's actually like an insecticide or even as an ingredient in some toothpaste. Over the millions of years, the seabeds rise and ocean levels fall, and the ocean floor becomes a salty desert. And so they take a look at the desert that blows all the way to the Amazon basin, was once a seabed, and look at the connections and how this is all together. You can see some of those little diatoms in close up and kind of how they're designed. And then it says scientists right now are material scientists are looking at how diatoms are really made to see if they can copy some of the ways that they're designed. And so it's pretty cool on, just the engineering and what it looks like and how they can kind of, do some nanoscale tiny, versions of these. Diatom structures are not just of interest to people. Nature has solved many of the problems that engineers want to solve. For example, diatoms are particularly good at making lightweight structures be really strong structures. Then we take a look at some things that are, that are out in nature that already are, really create strong structures. And so orthographic drawings are the standard method used in engineering industry to convey information about parts and structures. They consist of both a front, side, and top view. So students learn the basics of how to kind of build those, and then they're going to actually do a project with toothpicks to kind of create some of those structures. So we've talked a lot about Earth and a lot of ecosystems. Not all of our units are based on that. We have rockets, and we have duct tape shoes, and we have I'm trying to think of roller coasters. We've got lots of different ones. Just some of the ones we picked out to share today are kind of related to Earth and to the environment and to the climate and things like that. And so again, some really good videos that exist, still looking at the, our planet of how things all kind of tie together. Talking a little bit about warming and what that means and how that affects different places. And we have we talk a little bit about recycling, the importance of kind of using the resources that the Earth has. Talk about frozen rivers and the powers of glaciers. So just lots and lots and lots of things that exist in these that are really helpful. And then they take a look at also the importance of the sun and how it can give life and destroy life at the same time, and kind of how that all works. And how the Earth's core really helps the planet really be stable, and kind of the importance of that. So just super deep on all of these curriculums. You can just really go. And so I'm going to kind of just show a few more slides that kind of walk you through some of the things that include there. Just everything from looking at volcanoes and the flows and how that creates land, and looking at modeling different types of why lava goes. Do all the flows occur on the top of each other? What direction it goes? Why it goes? Where does the oldest layer occur related to later flows? Does that cause kind of the relation of that? Then a whole nother different unit that we have on the Wild West. We do a mining game that's related to granola bars and kind of figuring out, looking at how, mining was originally done. So there's just, I can't explain just how deep all of these different curriculums go. We also have some very science specific ones. We've got 3 different science camp curriculums that really look at specific areas. Like one of the first ones really looked at animals, solar energy, forces of motion, properties of air, polymers. And these were a million little broken down experiments that you could do to create, understanding of a concept, understanding of chemical reactions through 10 different experiments, things like that. One of ours is really looking at change, create, and compare, and how students can really see the changes. And we looked at it was a 5-day project. If you were going to do a science camp, for example, we looked at day one might be fluid behavior, understanding the properties of air and water. Day 2 might be the concepts of matter. So all of these are available on our website. You can download them. You can use them however you want. So there's just, here's an example of one of them of just, if we're going to teach density, we have 9 different activities related to density that you could do. If you wanted to teach acid and bases, there's 4 different ways that you can teach that. And so we're really trying to build on these concepts and really see where it goes. So one of the last ones I wanted to mention on is we have a robots unit, completely different than some of the earth things I've been talking about. And so they look at kind of Rube Goldberg and how he would build this, this idea of super complicated machinery to be able to, look at the 6 simple machines, and to be able to put toothpaste on a toothbrush, you're going to do all of these different activities. And so we have a unit that really looks at those simple machines and how to put them together, and actually how some really super complex machines are made up of those things. And so lots of different reactions, lots of things that they're looking at the design process, lots of things that go together to this. And so really there's a lot of different concepts that we're hoping that can be taught through these different curriculums that we have that are available out there. One of the last things that I wanted to really show, we have a recycle unit where kids actually create kind of art from recycling. And so in there, let me see if I can share my screen. There's a really cool video that some of you may have seen where students actually, in some parts of the world, or actually create, have, maybe I'll just share a little bit of this. This is kind of one of our final things. Let me see if I can get, let me see if I can get this to, hold on. May not be able to get it to work. Hopefully I can. Hold on. I think I might not be optimizing my video. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and try to share this.
¿Entienden? Bueno, entonces tienen que atender.
Mi nombre es Víctor, toco el cello.
Mi nombre es Ada Maribel Ríos Bogado y toco el violín.
Ahí va.
A group of kids in Paraguay actually made all of the instruments out of trash.
Look at this. That's a fork, people.
Okay, so just to kind of finish up kind of what we've been talking about, we really believe in the power of getting kids to understand how things work in the world, getting them to understand how learning can be fun, getting them to really see the concepts and how they all work together. And so in this recycling unit, they actually go through and learn what happens and why it's important to recycle. And then they actually their job is to create something new out of something old. And so each one of our units are completely different. And so if you have questions, or you'd love to have, like I said, we do trainings, but we intentionally, unpurposely put our stuff out there. You can use it. If you don't ever want us to come, you just want to use the resources, you totally can. But if you do ever want a trainer, you want someone to sit down with your staff and and really know how to break things down, maybe to do a summer camp, or we do everything from Lego camp to duct tape shoes to paper tissue, balloons, the hot air balloons, just all different kinds of things. But we love to work with students. We also really like to help people not have to reinvent the wheel. So again, feel free to reach out. Here's my contact information, my email, and our web address. So feel free to use anything that you find on our site. And we really hope that we've given you some ideas, but at the same time, we can see that we can go very deep with our instruction, and we can really keep kids engaged and hopefully really help them in the areas that they need to, by still being skill-based, still being targeted, but also being very rich in the instruction that we're able to provide. So I thank you for your time today. I hope that you really enjoy the conference, and we appreciate the chance to really be able to share what we shared.